we're literally never getting that Bloodborne remake. So there's been speculation about a Bloodborne remake for a long time now to catch the game up, give it modern graphics, and give it that standard 60 FPS we're so used to with just most modern games these days. In these past 2 weeks, we've gotten more details than ever before because mainly the speculation was just fans wanting the game. They desired the game. But now we're getting real information about why this hasn't happened and why, unfortunately, it probably will never happen. Today, I'm going to go into all of that. So what spawned all of this was a move that PlayStation made that really upset their fan base, their loyal fan base. And that was closing the studio Bluepoint. For those of you who don't know, Bluepoint most recently was known for remastering Demon's Souls. And shortly after this, they were bought and purchased by Sony. But what made this purchase so cool is they've done a ton of remakes. So if you go to their official website, they're still considered a PlayStation studio up until the end of March, but the studio is being shut down. But you can see some of their remakes. We have Shadow of the Colossus, rated at a 91. Demon's Souls was a 92. Still one of the best looking games we've seen on PlayStation 5, and it was a launch title, pretty much. It's insane to me that they never got back to this. And then Uncharted, the Nathan Drake collection, also an 86. Their games have been really good. But when you consider that Sony owns the Bloodborne IP, and they now own the studio who redid Demon's Souls, who did an amazing job remastering a FromSoftware game, the most logical conclusion you can come to is, why not do Bloodborne, the one everyone wants? It would just make perfect sense. You have an amazing studio that can remaster a FromSoftware game, and you already own the Bloodborne title. Go for it. But you will soon see some of the many reasons of why they didn't do this. Because as it originally looked, it looks like Sony really fumbled a huge bag here. So what the studio Bluepoint was originally working on was a God of War live service game. This is what they started working on after Demon's Souls. So we could see here, many hoped it would be the one working on the just announced God of War trilogy, which we just saw at their State of Play. But instead, they were working on a God of War live service game that was eventually canceled. And that just, no one was ever asking for that. The whole live service thing, you got to nail it if you want to drop a live service game today. And PlayStation keeps trying over and over again. But they're taking these single player studios and trying the live service route. You look at Embark, they did the finals before they did Arc Raiders. They were in the live service multiplayer industry. But PlayStation is taking these studios and they're just so desperate to get that live service and that nonstop income coming in instead of just focusing on making amazing games. We're kind of seeing with Marathon right now, Bungie, who has done multiplayer, and they have done live service, but their most recent game was a PvE game. And Sony bought Bungie and took them from PvE, which was what Destiny was primarily about. It had PvP, but it wasn't as good as Destiny 1's, unfortunately. But they were known for their PvE and their raids with Destiny 2. And they took that studio, had that studio completely revamp itself, and are trying to do an extraction shooter. And then they're trying to do this with God of War. And I've just never once played God of War and thought, man, I would love if this had multiplayer or live service in it. It just doesn't make any sense. And the fact that they wasted a studio that's been so good at single player remakes with something garbage like this just seems like a gigantic waste and a missed opportunity. But I promise you, this gets worse and worse. Because not only did a Bloodborne remaster seem obvious to the fans, but also the employees at the studio itself. So 4 Bluepoint employees have spoke out since the cancellation of the studio, and they said in early 2021, after Demon's Souls, studio staff assumed they would work on Bloodborne and started to prepare to. However, they did not get the green light due to internal politics of Bloodborne involving a fragile relationship with FromSoftware, Sony, and the original IP. Sources do not think Bloodborne remake will ever be made due to politics. So yeah, terrible news if you were hoping for that game to come out. I think it's crazy that they actually began working on the early stages of the game and it just assumed, like everyone else, that that's what was next. So everyone, after hearing this, was just blaming Sony over and over, going after Sony. So Sony had the studio make Demon's Souls as a launch title for the PlayStation 5, bought the studio, had them make a God of War live service, cancel that God of War live service because, of course, no one was ever asking for that. And then they canceled the studio. They got nothing out of this purchase. Just money being thrown away, just like with Concord. All those millions and millions of dollars down the drain. And then today we learned even more news, which just makes this even worse and just kind of gives more into the idea that we're never going to get a Bloodborne remake or remaster. Because as it turns out, Bluepoint pitched the game, like I originally noted earlier. Sony is not the ones who turned it down. They did not turn it down to do a God of War live service, but apparently it was FromSoftware. So early last year, Bluepoint again pitched the idea of doing a Bloodborne remake. This is after the God of War game was canceled. The studio was told that the numbers made sense, but From Software didn't want it to happen, according to people familiar with the process. Now, the reason behind this is Hidetaka Miyazaki has said that he kind of wants to do a Bloodborne remaster himself, that he would love to do that one day if he was able to. But the problem is with From Software is they're just too busy as it currently stands. They put time into making Elden Ring Night Rain. They put a bunch of time into making Duskbloods, trying to get that ready to go for the Switch 2 because that was announced with Elden Ring. I think Elden Ring was supposed to be a launch title for the Switch 2 or come out, very close to launch. That game's still not out yet after people got to play test it last year and it was just running horribly. We haven't heard anything about the Duskbloods or Elden Ring on the Switch 2 yet. And then there's also apparently a Dark Souls 3 remastered. And then, as From Software has already said themselves, they're still working on that gigantic single-player game that we're so used to. So they have a lot of projects and things going on within the studio right now, and that's the direction they want to go. And it just seems like we're never going to get Bloodborne because that relationship between From Software and Sony seems a little bit like it's fractured. They did not like the Demon's Souls remake. Even though the players liked it, they themselves did not like the direction that the studio took while remaking it. They didn't like that Sony put out that game. So to not make matters worse, Sony isn't going to try forcing the Bloodborne remake to happen if From Software doesn't want it to happen. They want that relationship to continue and to put out more games in the future with them. They don't want to throw that away. It's why when Kojima wanted to buy back the Death Stranding IP, he was able to buy back with no issues whatsoever. They don't want to fracture their relationships, believe it or not. They're trying not to. So with From Software being so busy and with Sony owning the IP to Bloodborne, it just seems like that game's never going to be made. And it's just so confusing because this seems like a home run. And I remember reading reports a couple years ago, Miyazaki, his stance on it was he was very happy that people were calling for the remake, but From Software simply doesn't own the IP. So you have Sony pushing for the IP to be made by the same people that made the Demon's Souls remake, but then you have Miyazaki saying that they don't own the IP, that's why they can't make it. So this is just, it doesn't make any sense to me. It really doesn't. You're getting two different stories here. So yeah, guys, that's it. Be sure to drop a like if you enjoyed this video and check out the channel of this content and share sort of thing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next.